Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again for what I can only say is one of my favorite episodes of the year, our year-end, year-in review, top 50 episode. Chris, my friend, how are you?
I'm good. I think I said to you, I felt like I was in high school again, cramming for an exam at the last minute. I re-listened to like so many albums in the last couple of weeks to really make sure that especially my top 25 are really indicative of how I felt about these albums this year, because I feel like I may have listened to more albums this year or this past year than I ever have in a year. My list came out to 112 albums I broke down into groups of 25, and we'll post the top 50 and we'll talk about the top 25 today. If you happen to choose something that is not in my top 25, I will make note of it as you go on your list and vice versa. But I'm thinking between the two of us, we'll probably cover a lot of ground here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Before we get started, let me first ask, did you have anything in this cram session that really moved a lot for you one way or another? I'm always curious to hear about like late bloomers or stuff that may have fallen out of favor as the year went on.
Yeah, and I'll mention them as we go, but cool. Yeah, there was one especially that skyrocketed pretty high. Actually, a couple that really moved up, and that in and of itself kind of pushed some other stuff down in that way. So I'll mention that when we get there. But yeah, there's definitely stuff like that. A lot of it too is because the stuff that I listened to at the beginning of the year was just more. I listened to more often just because there was more time to revisit. I had the whole year to listen to stuff that came out in January, but only had a couple of months to listen to stuff that came out in September, October, November. So some of that stuff kind of upon second or third listen, was like, oh crap, wow. Then there was No Spoon, who, if it wasn't for our podcast episode, I'm not sure they would have made my my list. But that definitely opened my eyes to that. So yeah, a lot of moving parts here. It was a very interesting year, but I feel pretty good about my list, and I'm excited to talk about it. It's funny because I was basically listening to everything from top to bottom, and what I did, just a little peek behind the curtain, is I made playlists every quarter and ranked the albums for each quarter to try to make it a little less daunting, because you listen to something in September and you're trying to compare it to something you listen to in February. It's kind of hard to do. So I thought I would separate it that way, and then at the end of the year re-listen to everything and kind of merge the four lists together. And so that's kind of what I did. I went to each list, listen to one from quarter one album from quarter two, and then kind of listen to it a little bit more mixed together. And so towards the end, I was really listening to all the albums that I probably enjoyed the least amount. And so it started to feel like kind of a slog. And then in the last couple of days, I went back and started listening from, the top to probably the top 20 albums from 1 to 20. And it just hit me in the face. I was like, oh man, this is so much more fun listening to these albums I ranked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of, 100, 101, 102.
Almost validating the list in many ways.
Yeah, well, but it's really just like apples and oranges to go from, the albums that I enjoyed the least, which, by the way, I have 112 albums on this list. I didn't think any of them were outright bad. They were just happened to be ones I didn't enjoy as much as others. But I mean, there's albums I have this section from just 101 to 112. It's just the outside the top 100. And I enjoyed listening to those albums. They were good albums. It's just, there was so much other stuff that I thought was better, and there was just so much of it. I'm almost a little bit in shock that I was able to order all of this stuff, because it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff, and I know there's people, yourself included, that listen to even more than than that. And for those people that can somehow put an order to it all, God bless, because this was definitely an exercise. But I feel good about it, and I don't think the prog fans are going to be very impressed with my list.
They may want to wait till the second half when they check out mine. But you know what? I have more questions, just broadly speaking, but I think we'll probably get to them throughout. So why don't we just jump right into it? Where are we starting with your list?
So I have at number 25, Sacred Outcries, Towers of Gold album. This one was, I liked it when I first listened to it. I liked it more going back to it again. I think having Daniel Hyman on vocals automatically improves pretty much everything that he's a part of. But I think that this was good in and of itself, and he just, I think, really put it over the top. I enjoyed this album quite a bit, and I've seen it on a lot of people's lists, like really high up. There were a number of albums that I think musically I enjoyed more, but I'd say vocal wise, this was probably one of my favorite vocal performances of the year.
Yeah, I get it. It is not on my list. I have it as like an honorable mention, so it's just outside the top 50 for me. Every year I make a playlist for February, which basically includes all the stuff that just missed my top 50 list, and this you'll find on that February playlist. I get it. I don't think the music is exceptional, but I think Daniel Hyman makes everything better, almost like chocolate. So, like, I get it. I really do.
He's the Jim Ross of metal vocalists.
That's right. I mean, he takes an average match and he makes it a 4-star classic. So I get it. I do. Just missed my list. What came in at 24?
I think you might be a little bit surprised. I think it shows growth in my widespread fandom of different types of metal. But I have Scar Symmetry's The Singularity Phase 2 Xenotaph. I didn't think much of this album the first time I listened to it, and then when I went back to it, it's pretty dense, as we like to say. But I really ended up liking this one a lot. It was probably my, I would say, looking at the list, it's probably my highest melodic death metal album of the year, although not the only one on the total list, but this was probably my favorite one. I thought that they just do such a good job of having those melodic hooks mixed with those clean vocal choruses, but with those like growly verses. I just thought it was a really well done album. I know it was kind of a hard to follow that the previous Phase 1 album, but I thought that this did a pretty good job. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's like I'm trying to think of like all these bands that are playing at Prog Power that are actually on this list, and this I guess will be the first one that I'm going to mention, and they're not going to be the last. But yeah, I like this one.
Nice. This album disappointed me a little bit, only because I liked the last one so much, and I think that if the last one had come out this year, it would have definitely been in my top 10. So this was anything short of that was going to be a little bit of a disappointment, but it is on my list. It comes in at number 46, and definitely worthy of its spot in the top 50. Have never seen them live. I am very much looking forward to their Prog Power set.
I forgot that they played at Prog Power the year that you didn't come.
Yeah, I have to say I'm eagerly looking forward to their set, but I got to be honest with you, I'm going to catch them in a few weeks on 70,000 Tons. I'm not waiting until Atlanta to see them. I
watched their set with the guys from Vanishing Point.
Nice, that's awesome. Yeah. How was it?
It was good. The best part was when James, otherwise known as Bushy from Vanishing Point, dove into the crowd to grab a drumstick at the end of the set that got tossed into the crowd. Like, he wanted that thing and he got it. They were good. I really enjoyed them, and I really enjoyed Soilwork also when they played at Prog Power. Like, I know that they're kind of like the kings of the melodic death metal genre, but they're definitely the bands I tend to enjoy the most in that realm.
Nice. Keep it going. I want to hear what else you got.
Number 23. This one was actually a big surprise. This was an album that I really wasn't even planning on listening to. because I usually just don't listen to their albums when they come out, and it's Iron Savior's Firestar. This one really surprised me at just how much I enjoyed it. They've kind of taken the place of like Primal Fear for me for just that good old fashioned German power metal. You know, Gamma Ray's not making any albums, and I don't know, Primal Fear is starting to get a little redundant, and maybe the fact that I haven't listened to Iron Savior in years has something to do with it. But I thought this was a great release, and I enjoyed this one a lot. I enjoy Pete's vocals. I think he has this very unique sound, and it kind of brings me back to those old, 80s records that he was on. But yeah, this was a surprise for me, and I'm glad that I forgot. I think it was one of our Facebook groups that we're in with some of the other metal podcasters, and someone had mentioned this album, and I was like, oh, what the hell? I'll give it a shot. And I was like, damn, this was way better than I was expecting. And I think that's just is due to just low expectations or no expectations. But I went back to it and just enjoyed it all the same. So for me personally, I think this might be one of the most surprising albums to be in my top 25 based on if I had no knowledge of the year going in.
I remember getting a text from you. I think it was late summer, maybe early fall, and you being like, dude, you're never going to guess what I'm listening to right now, and I'm enjoying it immensely. And I'm like, what is it? You mentioned the Iron Savior album. So I said, all right, I'll give it a listen, having no expectations whatsoever, because I'm just not a fan of the band. But I have to say, I agree with you. This release was really surprising to me. It did not make my list, but the fact that it made it onto the honorable mention list speaks volumes. There were a lot of albums that I heard which were much worse than this. I really enjoyed it, and it was enough to make me actually want to go back and kind of give some of their older stuff a listen, which I did, because I just never paid this band any mind. And with this one, I'm glad that I did, because I thoroughly enjoyed this album.
Yeah, and it's funny because they've consistently released albums over the years since 97 or 98, I believe the first album came out, back when like Kai Hansen was part of it and everything. And yeah, I don't know. I just I consider me paying attention going forward. I'll say that.
Nice.
Next at 22, I have Bloodbound's Tales from the North. I thought their previous album was a little bit not to my high expectations of their previous albums. I thought this was back to the standard that I held for this band. It's nothing new from Bloodbound, but it's just a really enjoyable, just power metal album, start to finish. I enjoy just the way that their vocal lines sound, just the way their whole sound comes together, I think is kind of unique, and I think they do a really good job with this one. I thought this was definitely a step up from their previous release.
This one does not appear on my list. It really just didn't hit me at any point, and I can't really say why, other than just saying I think I like the older stuff better, so they've kind of set a artificially high watermark for some of their older material. So I'm glad to hear you liked it, though, and as a power metal guy, I can certainly see why. It's just I thought there were better power metal releases this year.
All right, cool. Next, I have at 21 an album that we talked about on the podcast in long form, Sorcerer's Reign of the Reaper. This is probably an album that doesn't make the list if we don't cover it on the podcast. And I say that because I listened to it about 4 or 5 times, and it really grew on me. And as I've gone back to it, I've really enjoyed it just as much. So I expect that this will be somewhere on your list as well. But yeah, this was a really good album, and probably the real first time I really sat down and took in a Sorcerer album start to finish.
It is on mine. It's definitely on mine. It's definitely in the top 25. So I'll reserve a little bit here and just say more to come when it comes to Sorcerer.
Beautiful. Number 20, Temperance's Hermitage, Daruma's Eyes Part 2. I made a comment on an previous episode saying I don't remember there being a Daruma's Eyes Part 1, but it turns out it's an EP that the band released. So I'm posting a correction early in this new year. But this album took me a while because it's very dense. It's a long, and there's a long album. There's a lot going on. But man, I've always knew that Kristen Starkey was going to be a star. It's just it just was waiting for someone to ask her to be in a band and let her unleashed. And her voice is so just amazing. And I think that the band already was such a great songwriting band, great just melodic metal hooks. And you add her to the proceedings, and that's, no offense to any of the previous singers, but I think she adds just a whole new dynamic to this band. And a lot of fun guest spots. Alessandro Conti is on here, Fabienne Ernie, lots of good stuff here. The more I listen to this album, the more it really resonated with me. The first time I listened to it, I was just like, wow, that was a lot. But the more I listened to it, the more I enjoyed it. I thought this was quite good. I think it was probably outside of my top 25 at one point, and it kind of slowly snuck its way into that list. So
I had a similar experience. I listened to this album a lot when it came out, and for whatever reason, it just never grabbed me. And I listened to it, and then I kind of let it go by the wayside. And then I went back to it, and I listened to it again, and it really didn't grab me. And then I think I went back to it a third time, and finally I'm like, wow, this is really good. And so of all the albums on my list, this is one of the ones that ascended the quickest over the second half of the year, or like after it took a while for it to kind of move up, but when it did, it did. So believe it or not, I don't really have much to add other than I'm looking forward to their next release, because if this is now the new watermark, they've definitely left an indelible mark on me. I actually have this, believe it or not, at number 15. It came in pretty high for me. But if you would have asked me when it first came out, it was not even on my list.
Okay, yeah. Well, there you go. It sounds like we both had similar experiences with this one. Gonna have a little bit of a run of Frontiers-esque, not necessarily on the Frontiers label, but this kind of stuff you're going to find is becoming my favorite type of music, and it's just this melodic metal, melodic hard rock. I don't know how else to describe it, and I guess this band is probably the best band to use as a description for it, and it's Eclipse. The album is Megalomanium. I didn't really think much of this album the first time I listened to it. It sounded pretty much like every other Eclipse album, but man, the more I listen to it, the more the songs just get in, like they just get into you, and they get their hooks in you. And it's not the best Eclipse album in the world, but like even just their very good albums are so good. Like, and this is one of them. I enjoyed this one a lot. After I remember me and our other friend Justin kind of had a talk about one of the singles before the album came out, and we were like, oh, this one's a little weird. And now I've listened to the album so many times, I don't even remember what song we were talking about. It all just kind of, fits the album to me. So this is just the type of stuff where, like, if you're doing stuff around the house, cleaning or whatever, and you just need something to just bop to, if you don't have Material Girl by Madonna handy, I highly recommend this album. I know that, like, I guess Bleed and Scream is probably the high watermark for you with this band, and I know that they probably may never reach that height again, but I still think this album is worthy of being on this list. I like this one a lot.
Yeah, that's a band we have not covered, and that's an album that we haven't covered, which I think we need to change that. But I say that to say they've slowly kind of lost me a little bit with each of their subsequent releases. Not that they're bad. They're quite good. It's just there's other bands that I think are doing it just as well, if not better. And I have a couple of them on my list, so I'm curious to see if they're on yours as well. this album just never grabbed me. I put it in the Bloodbound pile of it's good, but it just gets lost compared to some of their own stuff, so it doesn't make the list.
Yeah, it's all good. Coming in next at number 18, I have Ronnie Atkins' third solo album, Trinity. I'm sorry, the man can do no wrong to me. Like, I love every song that he's recorded in these 3 solo albums. I love hearing him sing. I don't know if he's writing these songs or he's working with somebody or what, but the songs are just what you want to hear in that kind of frontier style. Just really catchy melodic stuff. I'm just glad that he's around to be doing these things, man. I always just put on his stuff and it just makes me happy. Like, it's just always great stuff.
This was on my list deep into the year, and it was kind of a late cut, if you will. So as new stuff came out, it did get booted a little bit, but I agree with you. Great stuff. Nothing you haven't heard from him before, but that's okay because everything he does is gold. So onwards and upwards for Mr. Atkins, and hopefully a Pretty Maids album makes the list in the not so distant future as well.
Nothing would thrill me more. It has been way too long. At 17, I have an album that kind of got lost in the shuffle at the beginning of the year because there were so many albums I listened to a lot at the beginning of the year. One of them that comes to mind that didn't even end up making my top 50 was Riverside's new album. Where is it on my list? Entity. And this was like right next to it. And I went back and listened to it. And like one of them kind of fell down. The other one shot up. This is the one that shot up. It's Rex Oria's Imperial Dawn. Just more just catchy melodic metal. But this time with these really awesome female vocals. I went back to this album and was like, holy shit, like this stuff is so damn catchy. It was another, like, you know, bop your head while running around the house sort of thing. Frida Olin is the name of the singer. They're from Sweden, if you don't know of the band. This is not their first album, but it's the first one I've listened to. They have 2 others. But, oh man, I thought this was fantastic. I loved it.
I didn't spend enough time with this one. I listened to it once. I don't know that I ever went back to it, and that's shame on me. I will go back to it.
I think you were the one who told me to listen to it, too.
Yeah, because I think when I first heard it, I'm like, this is Chris, like, through and through. And I'm sure it was probably my recommendation, but then I never went back to it enough to have it on my list. So that's on me, but I'm going to add it to my list now.
Yeah, well, like you said, we'll have playlists, so you're more than welcome to listen to it. It might be even harder for me to pick a song from each of these albums than it was to pick the album's order in the first place, but that's a job for another day. Number 16, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe have chosen Narnia, their Ghost Town album. Probably my first time digging into a Narnia album start to finish, but this was another one where that was kind of low on the list initially when it came out earlier in the year, and as I went back to it, I was just like, damn. And again, it's just like the last several albums I named, it's just these catchy ass like melodic hooks that it's my bread and butter. I love it. It's just a really catchy album. I love Christian Lilligren. Hopefully I didn't butcher that pronunciation. His vocals, I think, are so unique and awesome. And before you even mention anything about this, if you even listen to it, you're going to laugh at what album I have next.
Well, I just want to ask you one question, just going back to Narnia for 1 second. Did you happen to check out Flames of Fire as well?
No, I didn't have a chance. I think it was just I reached a point where I was just like, I can't I just can't fit anymore to my plate at this point. So
just for the
I've heard good things, but it's just
for the interest of completion. I think I feel I'd be remiss not to ask. So I didn't. They're not on my list. Neither one is, but not surprised you liked it.
Yeah, good stuff. I really would need to go back and listen to more from this band because they've been around a while, and if all their albums are like this, then hooray. The next album, apparently, I was just really into Christian metal because Theocracy's Mosaic is next on the list at number 15. I think that this is an album that probably would have ranked higher for me had it come out earlier in the year. I don't think I listened to it as many times as some of the other albums, but still, 20-minute song about the Red Sea, can't go wrong with that. I just think that Theocracy always has really strong releases, and this was another one. Really good, fast-paced, great production, great vocals. Matt Smith, just always does a great job. I would call it a bit of a disappointment that this album is at 15 and not like somewhere in the top 5 or 10, but I mean, there was just a lot of stuff I liked. I really, really liked that pulled ahead of it. I think any album on this top 25 was at the least a very good to great album for me. So I guess when this album came out, I just kind of figured, it's Theocracy. It's going to be like a top 5. But
I'm in complete agreement with you on this one. I actually had it at 14, so we're right neck and neck on this one. Great release. The production was just so powerful. And to be honest with you, I was kind of looking back at other albums on the list, and this was my power metal album of the year. I think that with the exception of maybe one or two other albums that were close, which I'll get to, this was actually my power metal album of the year. I thought it was really well done, and I kept going back to it over and over again, which I considered to be a sign that it needed to be somewhat high on my list.
Nice. Yeah. I feel like they seem to just get better and better. I think their previous release might be my favorite that they've done thus far, but this one's not far behind. Good stuff from Theocracy. Next, this is an album that I think I had close to the top 5, and it just kept getting pushed by other stuff that when I went back to like some of the older stuff, I was like, oh man, I don't know if it's because I listened to it more and there's a little bit more of that nostalgia for, earlier in the year, but it kind of got pushed down a little bit further. That's Angus, Cycles of Pain. That said, I would put this at maybe my favorite of the Fabio era Angra albums. I just really enjoyed. It's all come together. They don't feel like the same Angra that we grew up listening to with Matos and everything, but much like Stratovarius, like the new incarnation of this classic band is really, really good in the modern sense, and they fit this era, and it's fine. Like, I think there's a way to separate those things and to appreciate that there's a Matos era of Angra, there's an Edu era of Angra, and now there's a Fabio era of Angra, and they all kind of have their own flavor. And I think the fact that, Kiko's not involved in this album also kind of changes the dynamic as well. But I still enjoyed this album a lot. And again, I think this is probably one of the best albums they've done in quite some time.
I'm not going to disagree with any of that. I think that they are still relevant to this day. I also agree it's my favorite Fabio era Angra album, and I had it at number 18, so we're right next to each other there as well. Really good disc. I just think I preferred the Theocracy album a bit more for power metal, but they were neck and neck, and if you, on a given day, I could easily put the Angra ahead as well.
Yeah, I think I had them next to each other pretty much the whole time. Like, they just stayed next to each other, but they just moved up and down the list concurrently. Huh. You had your favorite power metal album of the year. Number 13 is my favorite prog metal album of the year, No Spoon's Opus. Man, I went back and listened to this album for the first time since we covered it on the podcast, and man, this album has staying power. I think this is going to be one of those albums that I go back to for years. Kind of like Beyond the Bridges, Old Man in the not Old Man in the Sea. That's something else, isn't it?
I think I've read that.
Yeah,
Old Man in the Bridge and the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe again.
Yeah, the one and only album that they made. But it still left such an indelible mark in my mind, and I have a feeling that No Spoon's probably going to release more than one album. But I thought this was one hell of a debut. I'm so excited to see them perform at Prog Power this year. I could say this year now instead of next year, which is great. This is just one of those albums you have to play it on headphones or at full blast, and when you get to that when you listen to Deathless Simpson, you just get to that part where he's like, stricken down in cold-blooded murder. Holy shit! Like, it's so powerful, man. What a great album! I'm so glad Knops brought it to our attention, and I'm glad that I kind of forced myself to go back, because I mean, this one really took me like 4, 5, 6 listens to really click for me, and I'm so glad that it did, because this was Opus was the right name for this album, because it certainly was an opus. And it's I guess not a great year for prog metal for me if this is my highest rated prog metal album, but I'm sure that you'll fill in those gaps for us there.
I had this on my list as well. I'll speak more about it later. This and Sorcerer I'll save for a little bit later.
Cool. Number 12 is an album that definitely grew on me the more I listened to it. Serenity's Nemesis AD. I just keep going back to that Reflections of AD song, and man, it's like there's like this they channeled Meatloaf's like aura somehow. But the whole album is excellent all the way through. The best part, not the best part, but one of the things I think is just very striking about this album is the first voice you hear on this album is Roy Khan. Because he's just starts singing in the first song. And I had to like check to make sure I wasn't listening to an old Camelot album or a new Conception album or what. But overall, this is probably one of my favorite Serenity albums in a while. I like this one a lot. And every time I went back to it, I liked it even more. They've kind of taken this kind of like that Avantasia style without the millions of guests, but just like a very theatrical style of symphonic power metal. I think it has elements of prog in it, but it's definitely more of a symphonic power metal. But I really enjoyed this album. And I think the first time I listened to it, I was like, oh yeah, it's another Serenity album. And then as I listened to it more and more, I was like, oh yeah, this is a very good Serenity album. So Ritter, Todd, and Tuffle, man.
Excuse me. This band has lost me quite a bit over the last few albums. I feel like whether it was uninspired or whether it was just like more of the same, I kind of felt disenchanted with them at least a little bit. And so I had no expectations when I put the new album on, but when I listened to it, damn, did I like it. I was like blown away by it in many regards. And there was a period where this was even higher up on my list. But to make a long story short, I have it at number 29. The band is back. I look forward to seeing them live in just a few weeks. My perspective has just changed completely. And I would argue that Reflections of AD, the song, is probably one of my favorite songs of the year. Definitely top 5. Just a complete, unexpected, home run from these guys. And even though it's a little bit lower on the list, it don't take, draw no inferences from that. At any given time, this could have been a top 10 album for me.
Beautiful. Number 11, I think, is a very pleasant and happy surprise for me, and that's Camelot's The Awakening. I think this is the best Tommy era Camelot album that we've heard so far, at least for my taste. And it makes me kind of laugh because I remember when the first single, One More Flag in the Ground, dropped ahead of the album, and there was so much negativity about it on social media. And now I'm going back and like after hearing them perform the song live at Prog Power last year and just going back and hearing it, it's like this song is awesome. What the hell is the matter with everybody? Like, it's just, sometimes it's easier to just hate on stuff and just wait till next week when we talk about Time 2 by Wintersun. Not in full, obviously, it's not out yet, but we'll talk about how that has been supposedly completed. But anyway, I digress. I just thought this was such I kept waiting for the ball to drop as I would listen to the album. I was like, okay, it's gonna start to not just be kind of middle of the road. And one song after another, it was the songwriting was super strong. Tommy, I thought, sounded fantastic. Not that he ever doesn't, but I thought this was definitely like, much like Angra, Camelot's really coming into their own with this current incarnation. And I think I'm back on board with this band again. Again, it's almost like a completely different band than what they were during the Fourth Legacies and the Karmas and the Black Halos of the time. But it's okay. Like, this version is fine by me. And I honestly was expecting when I heard this album was coming out that it wouldn't even be in my top 50, never mind my top 15. So kudos to Camelot. Great album.
This was the best, or I should say the first time that Tommy's vocals didn't sound forced on a Camelot album. It flowed seamlessly with the music, and I can't tell you how much of a refreshing listen it was to hear Camelot without it. Tommy just seems integrated and a full part of the band now, and it doesn't just seem like some guy filling in for Roy Khan. So to that end, by far the best modern Camelot album, well produced, great orchestration, highly melodic, and a return to form. I have it at number 41. It too was higher at certain points. I think it was kind of a victim of the fact that I didn't go back to it as much in the second half of the year because I was trying to listen to other releases. But I thought this album was excellent. I never thought I would rank another Camelot album in my top 50, but it deserved its place. This was a really pleasant surprise.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. We enter the top 10, and this one is not a surprise based on their last few albums. Pure Amaze's Bloodlines, just another fantastic album from them. Another one that the more and more I went back to it, the more and more I enjoyed it. Terrier's vocals are just great, and the songwriting's phenomenal. This was another one that I just really, really liked, and it probably like started out somewhere in like the 25 range, and then just slowly, every time I listened to it, crept up higher and higher and higher. This is just a band that I think is really just clicking in all the best ways. Just really, really enjoyed this album a lot. So yeah.
The interesting thing about this is that I think the last two albums hit me immediately. And when I say hit me, I mean they were both top releases for me. This one was slightly disappointing in that it came in at number 28 for me, which is still a really, really high up on my list, considering all the stuff I listened to. It just took a little while to kind of get there. And I'm not sure that it has the staying power as the last two, but I definitely like this release. I almost felt guilty putting it at 28, but alas, that's where it wound up.
It's clear that you're not Italian because guilt is way stronger for us Italians. But this one, just for my own OCD, it was a little bit disappointing that this one came in at number 9 because it's the band 10. Something Wicked This Way Comes. Gary Hughes's his band. I hadn't really listened to a 10 album in a while, and when I saw that they were releasing an album, it came out pretty early in the year. I figured, let me give it a listen. I was actively trying to listen to more stuff this year, and my God, this album freaking slaps, man. Like every song is just so catchy. I'm not sure I would even call it a metal album. It's more of like it's kind of in more of like a hard rock AOR kind of deal, but man, it's just, I love it. Like the instrumentation, the songwriting, the vocals, just an outstanding album. If you skipped this one or just wasn't aware of it, I highly recommend that if you just love just really good melodic music, this one is a really, really great album, and I will not be skipping any more 10 albums going forward. I mean, there was I think 7 albums that went by since the last time I listened to one of their albums. I think Twilight Chronicles from 2006 might have been the last one that I really dug into. So I don't know. I'm so glad that I listened to this because this was such a treat.
Another band that I think we need to cover at some point. I really enjoyed this album as well. I had this at number 20. This band is just the model of consistency for me. I feel like every album is good, if not great. This one was really, really good. And the title track was one of my favorite songs of the year. I just thought it was a phenomenal song. I'm glad to see you liked it even more than I did, comparatively speaking. Great band. Great band. And just an easy listen. You can put it on, chill. It's not overly thought-inducing. It's just catchy, and I'm all in.
Awesome. Yeah, really just a lovely surprise for me. Number 8, a band we talked about a lot in 2023, Ad Infinitum's Chapter 3 Downfall. Boy, I listened to this album probably even more than I would have because of our career retrospective episode that we did. But after seeing them perform some of these songs live and actually getting to meet the band and seeing how cool they are, probably didn't hurt their placement on this list. But I enjoy all 3 of their albums, and you can go back and listen to our career retrospective, and I'll go into more detail as to why on that. But even though this is not my favorite Ad Infinitum album, I still enjoyed the hell out of it. And every time I went back to it, I was it's almost like every time I got back to it, I forgot how good it was. And I had to remind myself. And I probably hadn't listened to this band since we saw them at Prog Power. So I popped this one in the other day and I was like, oh yeah, this one still is pretty awesome. So that's my number 8.
I have them at my number 32. There was a while where this was top 5, even top 10, and it slowly kind of went down the list almost out of fatigue. And I say that because I just think that after doing the career retrospective, I had the chance to absorb everything, and I'm like, well, the new album's very good. I don't know that it's better than Chapter 2, which is probably my favorite at this point. So it kind of victim of its own success, but definitely an enjoyable album, a band that I have a feeling if they released an album next year, it would be in the top 50 yet again, just because they're so consistent with what they do. Good stuff. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Number 7 harkens back to a conversation I had with you earlier. Judgment. Is it spelled with an E in the middle? Judgement, or just Judgment? We're both in the only one E in Judgment camp. Love Bites disagrees. I have them at number 7 with their Judgment Day album. This is one of those bands where every time an album comes out from them, I listen to it once. I think it's good. I listen to it again. I think it's very good. I listen to it a third time. I'm like, holy shit, I love this. Their previous album, I think, was pretty high up on my list the year that was released. This is no exception. I am absolutely amped about seeing this band perform live at Prog Power this year. For those that don't know, this is an all-female Japanese power metal band, and they just absolutely shred. The music is just this fast-paced, just upbeat, fun music. And the reason that I enjoy this more than, say, a Galnerius, who they were actually on the outside of my top 50. I had them at number 53. Is the fact that they sing in English, and I think that kind of is a little bit more appealing to me. But I also just enjoy the music a little bit better. What they do is fantastic, and I'm so glad. I really didn't peg them as a band that would have been on Glenn's radar to book at Prog Power, so I was just very pleasantly surprised when their name popped up on that video announcement. So really great stuff, and I'm really excited to see them live.
I listened to the album. it didn't do anything for me above and beyond the fact that I can appreciate they're great musicians. I need to really do a deep dive on them because I just don't hear it or I don't get it. They're not on my list. That is not to say that the music itself isn't technically proficient, fast, catchy in many ways, but for some reason I just don't see them stand out amongst some of their peers. So that's on me and something I have to definitely go back and listen to. And I have a feeling before 2024 is out, we'll have covered at least one of their albums.
Yeah, don't worry. We will definitely be doing a career retrospective sometime in the summer as punishment for you not putting them on your list.
Very good.
For 2023.
Excellent. I've got my own grave that I've just dug, so very well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't even know if I would want to put myself through that just because they do have a pretty large catalog of albums already. I'm sorry?
We can certainly do this album.
Yeah, or even maybe something akin to our Powerwolf episode where we kind of go over the set list for a band that maybe you're not so sold on yet, and then you go see live, and then you admit that you were wrong the entire time.
Well, that's what I did with Powerwolf, so we may as well do it again next year.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly why I brought it up. Number 6 is an album that came out early in the year and just never left the top slot, and that was Beyond the Black's self-titled album. Again, one of those albums where I think the first time I listened to it, I was like, okay, it's another Beyond the Black album. And the more and more I listen to it, it's just like I love how catchy their songs are. I love Jennifer Haben's vocals. I just I don't know that there's really much else to say about this band. I just think whenever they release an album, much like Unleash the Archers, it's always going to be high on my list. I just really enjoyed this one, and the opening track, Is There Anybody Out There, man? It's the fact that they had still made an album after this one song because they completely hit it out of the park on the first track. I like this band a lot. I am begging for them to come to the U.S. and play a show. I want to see this band live so badly, but they have yet to play a show in the U.S. I thought for sure they'd have been invited to Prague Power. For all I know, they have been, but they just haven't made it over yet. But they are from Germany, and I enjoy them a lot. So, yeah, really, really enjoyed this one. Might be up there as one of my favorite Beyond the Black albums, as a matter of fact.
Came in at number 34 for me. It, too, was high up on my list early on in the year and just kind of fell victim to some other stuff that I like better. But I have it in my notes. I'm like, I wish this is what Within Temptation would sound like. And then I think it probably got knocked because there was another band that outdid them on that front as well, which I'll talk about later on. But yeah, this is a band that I'm really hoping I get to see live at some point. I'm all in. This album got better with each and every listen, and I think that while some tracks are good, I think others were great, and I thought it was a very good release.
Well, just for comparison's sake, I will say Within Temptation's Bleed Out album I had at number 76.
Wow. Okay. There you go.
This was, to me, this was miles ahead. I just, I don't know that there's like a particular era of Within Temptation that Beyond the Black reminds me of particularly because they're not as symphonic. But I agree with you that there is similarities there, and I think what they're doing is better right now.
No doubt about it.
Number 5 was kind of a late addition, and the second time I listened to this album, it blew me away. I don't know what the hell I was doing the first time I listened to it, but Axe and Stars Chapter 8 is one of the best power metal albums that came out this year, and I still have a couple left on this list, but this one I just loved it. Another band that I feel like either I listened to their previous couple of releases once and didn't think much of it, or I just didn't listen to it at all. I don't know what happened, but I saw that they were releasing a new album. I heard one of the singles ahead of time, got excited, got the album, and then the second and third times I listened to it, was absolutely blown away. Just that kind of power metal that I absolutely love. Fast-paced, catchy, high pitched vocals. It's got everything. I was so happy to see this album on other people's lists because I kind of thought I was like alone on this one. But I did see I saw this on a number of other lists, so that kind of gave me a little bit of validation because I feel like I ranked this one pretty high, but I enjoyed it that much.
Yeah, I remember you saying a couple of weeks ago, like, did you have a chance to listen to it? And I had, and I went back to it and I listened to it again. I certainly see why you liked it, but it certainly sounds like that second time was the charm on this one for you.
Yeah, definitely. And to keep that style going at number 4, I wearing the shirt, Sky Blazers, Infinity's Wings. God, this might have been the first album I listened to in 2023, and it just stayed up top all the way through the year. This was my go-to album, like many Power Quest and Rainseed / Majestica albums in the past. The album I would go to when I just wanted to hear something that was going to put me in a good mood. Johannes he's taken his love of those two bands and others and just kind of made it his own. And this album is so much fun to me. Like, these songs are just so majestic, and there's songs that just you feel like you just want to like march into a castle. Like, it's just so epic, and it's what it warms my heart knowing that we're going to go into a future that doesn't involve Power Quest anymore. We have somebody that's kind of holding that mantle and keeping that flame alive of that style of music that brings me so much joy. And it's just that speedy, upbeat, happy power metal. Johannes, cheers, my friend. This is the first album for Sky Blazer. Hopefully hopefully first of many, but this one just kicked my ass from day one, and it hasn't. It was my album of the year at one point.
I had a feeling if you would have asked me, gun to my head, what's your album of the year, I would have guessed Sky Blazer. And then when I saw you wearing the shirt, I said, "Oh, this is a tell. I know this trick or what have you." So I'm shocked it's number 4. But I agree with you. I think that this was a hell of a debut. I think that the best is yet to come from these guys. I am hoping that they can continue to grow, and now that he's got a full band behind him, I think the live show is going to be a big to do. But I have this was number 49 on my list. It was probably one of top 5 power metal albums that made my list. So one of the top 5 power metal albums this year, and the best I think is yet to come, if I'm being honest.
Love it. Number 3, this is the one that I'm so curious if they're on your list, where on your list they landed. But this album, I liked it a lot, and then I listened to it in this past week, and I was like...
Wait, let me guess.
Yeah, please.
Is it Twilight Force?
Nope.
Okay.
It is not Twilight Force.
Right.
It is Crown's Operation Phoenix. Absolutely adore this album. This band is, I love their last album. I think this one's even better. I even have the vocalist's other album from Art Nation in my top 50 at number 41, but I thought this one blew that one out of the water. Every song is just a banger. This is, when I think of Frontiers metal, this is what I'm talking about. Just the best kind of catchy melodic stuff. They have outdone Eclipse, they've eclipsed Eclipse, if you will.
Nice.
I find myself looking more forward to their stuff than Dynasties or Eclipses. This album really kicked my ass, and I loved it.
So to answer your question, this album is on my list, and to answer your question even more poignantly, we both have it at number 3. I fucking loved this album. This was the reason why Eclipse couldn't make my list. Like, this album just blew the Eclipse out of the water for me. And I have Art Nation on my list as well. I'll get to that a little bit later. This guy's vocals, he takes it's the Daniel Hyman effect. He takes good songs and makes them great. The difference is Crown writes great songs and he makes them like unforgettable. Love this album. Loved everything he touches. This was just so catchy and so much fun. And I would go back to it after not listening to it for a while and being like, yeah, I don't know why I didn't listen to this for 2 months. And it would happen time and time again. This is a band I have to see. I have to see this guy sing live. I'll lose my mind.
Same. I think when I put together our collective rankings, this will probably be the Metal Exchange album of 2023 based on our. I just have a feeling based on my number 1 and number 2 that you might not have either of these albums listed as high or at all.
Both entirely possible. Although admittedly,
I have a feeling one of them. One of them's on your list. I think the other one is iffy. But at number 2, I have Delane's Dark Waters. Holy shit! This band is frickin' back. Like they went from me thinking that Delane didn't exist anymore to thinking, oh, they got a new singer. How the hell is this going to compare to Charlotte Wessels, who's one of my favorite singers? Okay, sorry, I apologize. I should have had more faith. This is the best Delane album this might be the best Delane album that was ever made.
It's not April Rain, but I'll put it at number 2. How about that?
Yeah, it's up there for me. I think every time I went back to it, I was like, holy shit, this album is just so damn good. And I thought they did a hell of a job live. I mean, I thought that may be some rust, and granted, they played a lot of shows before they played at Prague Power, but I thought that they sounded great. Got to meet a few of them backstage, and they couldn't have been nicer. I said it before, and I'll say it again. Diana Leah had a very unenviable job of following up a very well-known and loved vocalist for a very well-known and popular metal band. And I think she really not only did it with grace and humility, but some of the best songs that the band has ever written. I don't know if Martijn and Charlotte were sharing songwriting duties, and so Martijn was not like just crunching out these bangers or whatever. But I just can't get over like how this album was just such a surprise for me, just because I really didn't know what to expect. And it's funny because I remember somewhere towards the beginning of the year, I had messaged Glenn, and I just said to him, I was like, when you booked this band for Prague Power, did like Martijn send you any did you have any idea what to expect? And he goes, honestly, it was a complete shot in the dark. And I said, well, I think it's going to work out because their new album is out of this world. And sure enough, I believe it was on Glenn's top 50 list as well for 2023. But man, I can't say enough about this one. This was and this one I will say, this and my number 1 album pretty much were like 1A, 1B. I had to pick one, and I think I just enjoyed listening to my number 1 the last time I listened to it so much. It kind of just pushed it ahead by like a millimeter. But man, I have to say, like my top 10, I just enjoyed the hell out of all these albums. I mean, they probably could be in any order really. But this is kind of what I decided I wanted set in stone. But yeah, I just really enjoyed this album a lot. And if you kind of gave up on Delane, I know our mutual friend Justin was not a fan of some of the Charlotte era stuff, and I think they won him over with this album and their performance at Prague Power. I would say give him a shot, because this is a new Delane or an old new Delane. I don't know how you want to put it, but just really good stuff.
Early on in the year, this was my album of the year. I loved it, and I couldn't believe how good it was. And maybe I had low expectations. I don't know, but it just blew me away the first time I listened to it, and it didn't really drop very much for me throughout the year. I think it's a little unbalanced with the beginning and the end both being so outstanding. But I would argue that The Quest and the Curse might be their best song ever. The second I heard that song, I just kept listening to it over and over, and that is not something I usually do, but I loved it. This was a no doubt top 5 disc for me. It was melodic, it was poppy, it was enjoyable. It ultimately settled at number 4. So I'm right there with you. This album is fantastic.
I guess that means that Delain and Crown are pretty much tied for the album of the year, unless we both have at number 1 Twilight Forces at the Heart of Wintervale. I gotta say, when I believe his name was Christian, the previous singer from Twilight Force, Christian Eriksen, yes. When he left the band, I thought that he had such a distinct and unique voice. I thought it was going to be like, I was just not going to dig this band anymore. That's kind of what happened with Gloryhammer with me. That was a band that they had my album of the year, I think, a few years ago. And this year, their newest album came in at number 39 for me. And a lot of that has to do with just the change in vocalist was so jarring for me. This is the opposite. Alessandro Conti came in. He's the singer from Trick or Treat. He came in and he absolutely fits this band to a T. It was the first single I heard, I thought was a little bit weird, and then I got over it really quickly. This is the metal that I fell in love with Rhapsody when I was 16, 17 years old. Except this is better than anything Rhapsody has done in years. It's so uplifting. It's listen, if you think that like medieval symphonic power metal is cheesy, well, guess what? This isn't going to change your mind. But I absolutely love this album. It was really up there all year. This was another one that came out pretty early in the year, but this just never wavered for me. And I listened to it again recently and just was like, damn, like this band just keeps getting better and better. So, in my top 25 bands that are playing at Prague Power next year, that would be Twilight Force, No Spoon, Angra. I think that was there one other one on this list? Maybe not. Love Bites. So a lot of good stuff to look forward to. But yeah, this was such a great album. My power metal album of the year and my prog metal album of the year are both playing on the same night at Prague Power. Oh, and Scar Symmetry as well on that same night. So 3 bands playing in one night that are in my.
So you got your melodic death metal album, your power metal album, and your.
Exactly. So I guess Milton knows how to pick them. But this was number 1 for me. This is just one of those albums for me where I'm like, Justin either like this or like heard it once and was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous, and didn't go back to it.
It was definitely one of those two. I listened to this album when it first came out, and even I was like, wow, this is good. And I was pleasantly surprised by that. I thought the production was better than anything they had done. I thought the orchestration was better. But most importantly, I thought the songwriting was just better than anything they had done in the past. It was just really catchy, just as cheesy as ever. But this is, if you like your power metal with flowers, this is going to scratch that itch 10 times over. For a while, it was my number 1 power metal album of the year. Ultimately, Theocracy and Angra would take that flame and run with it a bit, but this definitely was in my top 25. It came in at number 21. It was top 10 for a while, man. This got bumped probably within the last 6 weeks, and it went down, but it never fell out of the top 25 for me, which is saying something, because I think when you see my list, there's a lot of stuff in there that's a little more my cup of tea that you might not have enjoyed, but a worthy choice. And I would have guessed this or Delain, so I guess I was right because I hit 2 out of the 3.
There you go. I just, man, all it took for me was to go back and listen to the very first track, which is called Twilight Force, and the last 30 seconds of that song is some of the most epic music I've ever heard written, and just the way that it ends is just so triumphant, and it's just like, you guys nailed it. You just absolutely nailed it. So I'm so excited to see this band live again, now with Alessandro at the helm with doing vocals. But yeah, this is just a band that I have come to just look forward to new releases from. There again, there's an opening for my favorite modern power metal band now that Power Quest is retired. So Twilight Force might be in contention to fill in that spot. So we'll see. Maybe Johannes has a sophomore album that is ready to move on to number one on my list in one of these future years. But I will say overall, I thought this was such a great year. 2023 was such a great year for music. And in all honesty, I have, and you'll see it when it gets posted later in the week, but the albums that I had from 26 to 50 were all really good albums that I enjoyed a lot. So there's just a lot to like that came out last year in 2023. Hell, like even looking at like my 51 through 75, there's a lot of albums that I really enjoyed, but just there was stuff that I just happened to enjoy more. So we'll be posting our lists later in the week with the back half of our top 50. And if anybody's really interested in knowing what my 51 through 100 are, feel free to ask. I'll be happy to let you know, because I actually did order them all. I remember when making, I think the first time we did one of these, I struggled to come up with a top 25. I didn't even have a top 50. I just did a top 25, and now I had 112 albums I listened to and ranked. So so much for free time, I guess.
I actually want to touch on one of the things you said. So before I get into my list, I just want to say, I think that unlike other years, this year I felt like was there were a couple of albums at the top, but if you kind of took, I don't know, album 11 through probably 75 for me on any given day, given my mood, it could have moved up or down 30 or 40 slots. I don't know that there was that much of a disparity between that. So when you look at my list, ultimately I think that you're going to say, oh, this album, how could it have been at 48, or how could it have missed the list? The reality is anything that was kind of in the conversation was not that far off from being in the top, 12 or 15. I think the cream really rose to the top with like the top 10 or so. Those are albums that really kind of hit me for one reason or another, and I'll get to those momentarily as I make my way through the list.
Yeah, very good. I think probably one of the biggest drops for me, I had, and you're going to laugh, but I had the Angus McSix and the Sword of Power album ranked pretty high initially, and the more I listened to it, just the goofier I think it got, and there was just other stuff that I liked more. It ended up it's in my top 50. I have it at number 32, but it was significantly higher at one point. It came out earlier in the year, so I think it had that working for it. It still was a million times better than I could have possibly imagined an album by a guy named Angus McSix could possibly be. But it's a very fun album. And it's on that list, but that was, you had asked about things that, moved drastically up and down the list. That was probably one of the ones that dropped the most. I'm just looking through. It doesn't look like mostly everything else kind of, if I hadn't mentioned it already, kind of pretty much stuck where it landed initially, which I guess means I should have a little bit more confidence in my initial reaction towards things. But that's pretty much it. There's a few other things I'll probably mention when we go through your albums, and if not, when we talk about some of our year-end awards. But because if you know me, you'd probably say there's one band that seems to be notoriously missing from that list.
I'm going to get to that. I'm curious as to why or what happened or what have you, but I bet I can guess who it is.
I'm sure you can.
Well, all right. So let's start mine, shall we?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so I was kind of thinking to myself, how much overlap did we have? And I think between your list and mine, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It looks like there was about 15 in common from my 50 to your 25. So for whatever that's worth. The rest of which I'm kind of curious as I go through mine to see if any of these are on your list in any way, shape, or form. I have a feeling some might be. I have a feeling others might not be. But away we go, shall we? At number 25, a Norwegian prog metal band that literally came out of nowhere. I had never heard of this band. They were called Mayfire, and the album was called Cloudscapes and Silhouettes. And they basically do this brand of modern prog metal, which was like intoxicating when I first heard it. It was really, really good with this lush sound. And if you like melodic keyboards and not so much a Dream Theater Images and Words vibe, but something that a band like a Caligula's Horse is doing, I think you'd really like this. Although I think the keyboards are more prominent in the mix. And as I said, every time I went back to it, I just really enjoyed this one. So much so that it came in at number 25.
Nice. I honestly don't think I've even heard of the band, so
nice.
That'll be one I'll have to check out.
I think you will. I think there's a chance you could really like that one. And I know you like number 24 because it's a band we've talked about already, and that was Art Nation with their newest album. And I gotta be honest with you, when I was going back and I was listening to this album called Inception, the thing that stood out to me more so than prior Art Nation albums was that it had a little bit more balls to it. For a melodic hard rock band, it just seemed like they were writing a little bit heavier material, and I really gravitated towards it. And although I don't know that it holds a candle to the new Crown album, it was really good. And every time I went back to this, I was surprised at how much I actually enjoyed it.
I liked it too. There was a handful of albums in that area that I liked a little bit more. Even the Cray album, 3 Weightless.
Yeah.
I had at number 37, which was 4 slots higher than Art Nation. I thought that was quite good as well. But those two plus Crown and Eclipse were probably my 4 favorite of that, Frontiers, type stuff. But I agree with you that this Art Nation album had a little bit more of a bite than some previous ones that were almost kind of like a softer version of Eclipse or Dynasty. And so good year for I don't know the vocalist name off the top of my head, but good year for him because those 2 albums were both very good.
Oh, his name is Alexander Strandell, and he's fucking ridiculously fantastic. I just that voice, man. It doesn't matter what the guy sings, but because of the strength behind his vocals, I almost want him to do heavier stuff because it really gives him a chance to kind of soar over the top of some of this stuff. So I'm glad you like both, though. I really am. And as I kind of go through this list, we're going to get to some bands that I'm actually curious to see. Some I don't know if you've heard. Others I'm curious to see if maybe you just flat out didn't like as much as some of the stuff that you mentioned. So one of those albums is comes in at number 23, and I'd be lying if I knew exactly how to say this band. The album is called The Approbation. The band is called Arkverst. It was on Glenn's list, although I don't know how he even heard about them, but I remember hearing this album when it first came out. And I said to myself, this is something that I am going to fall in love with over the course of the year, because it was this seamless blend of Porcupine Tree and Opeth, which is 2 of my favorite things, like blended together. So I'm all on board with these guys. And it was an album that was on my list. And then I went back to it in November after not listening to it for a few months. And I'm like, yeah, this album holds up exceptionally well. I was a big fan of these guys. Don't know where they came from. Don't know how they appeared. But as soon as I heard this disc, I knew it was a winner.
It's what is that quote? Is it from Pokemon? Like a wild Arcvist appears. I saw them on Glenn's list, and I really had every intention to go and listen to all the bands from Glenn's list that I was not aware of, and there were many. But I just never got around to it. They were his number 4 album of 2023, so he obviously felt pretty strongly about it. But I'll have to go back and check them out on your playlist because I missed this one, unfortunately. But yeah, I was aware of them thanks to his list.
Yeah, they're very good. I think you'll get some enjoyment out of that one. May take a little while, but I think you'll get there. At number 22, I had no idea that Rush was putting out an album this year, but they did. Except instead of a 3-piece, the band's a 2-piece, and they're called Crownlands. And the album, which was one of the bigger surprises this year, was called Fearless. Holy smokes. This is like Rush meets Coheed and Cambria with just 2 guys. And I don't know how they're able to do this, but this album I just got a lot of pleasure out of. Obviously, the Rush connection is strong, but it's really just because I thought the songwriting was great. I thought the production was great. And it was one of those albums that, like, I completely wasn't expecting to hear anything in this style, let alone done in such a high quality manner. So it made the list. It came in at number 22. And if anything, that might be a touch low.
I had this album at number 31.
Nice. That's high for you.
I like this one a lot. It reminded me of my favorite era of Rush, which is like the early 80s when they kind of went through like their new wave Rush phase.
Yeah.
I definitely get some of that Coheed vibe as well, but this is an absolutely impressive beast of an album done by 2 people. But man, if you like old school Rush, there's nothing that you're not going to like about this. This is really cool, and I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. But I'm with you. The songwriting is just really top notch. I enjoyed this one a lot, and it was probably in my top 25 at a certain point in time, and just kind of got crowded out. But I definitely recommend this to anybody who likes Rush or Rush adjacent type music.
Yeah, well said. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. They're playing Prog Power this year as well?
Not to my knowledge.
No? Okay. For some reason, I thought they might.
Unless they're the mystery band for day one.
No, I for some reason I thought that they were on the lineup, but I guess I was wrong about that.
I wouldn't have been sad if they were.
No, that makes 2 of us. I was kind of looking forward to seeing them, so I'm shame I'm wrong about that one. But as we move through this, Twilight Force at 21, 10 at 20, and that gets us to number 19, which is Italy's Noveria, and the album is called The Gates of the Underworld. This is one of those under-the-radar bands with great production, great technical ability, and great songs, and it's just kind of how I like my modern prog metal. This is a band that should be much bigger than they are because they have a bunch of releases, and every one is better than the next. And I don't quite understand why nobody talks about them along with the greats like your Hakens and your Symphony X's or anything like that. But this album was really good if you had a chance to listen to it.
I had this one at number 43.
Okay, top 50.
I enjoyed this one as well. I thought it was very good. Probably could have stood to listen to it a couple more times.
Sure.
I think I only got a chance to listen to it twice, start to finish, but it's still managed to make it in my top 50. That's how much I enjoyed it.
Nice. That's definitely telling to me. I also could have spent some more time with it, but the few listens that I had, I'm like, this definitely has to make the list in a fairly high spot. Anger at 18, as I mentioned, and now we get to number 17, which is definitely one of the biggest surprises of the year. If you would have told me that this album was making the list, I probably would have laughed. And then all of a sudden I heard it. I'm like, this is about as close to an album that we covered on the podcast as I've heard from this band. And with each listen, it just kind of went up and up and up, and it kind of settled in here at number 17. The band is Mercenary. The album is Soundtrack for the End Times. This is not a perfect Mercenary album, but it is by far their best since Hours That Remain. It was a really big treat for me and a really nice surprise. If this is the return of the band that I love, we can do a lot worse. I loved this album, and it just, over time, I realized how much I actually enjoyed it.
Nice. This one fell slightly outside of my top 50. I had it at 54. But I did enjoy it. I thought I enjoyed the Scar Symmetry album a bit more, but this was very good. It might have suffered from the fact that I heard name that album again that you mentioned.
Hours That Remain.
Yeah, the fact that I heard that album also for the first time in 2023 probably didn't help.
Listen, if that album had come out this year, I think it would still be my album of the year. So I'm with you.
Yeah, but still, it was a very solid album, and I probably my favorite modern Mercenary album, since it's probably the only one I've listened to start to finish. So, but good choice. Yes.
Nice. The next band was a complete surprise for me insofar as I had no idea that the band was back together, or that if they had never left, it was their first release in 5 years. They're a Boston, Massachusetts prog metal band called Aviations, and the album is called Luminaria. This shit is modern prog metal at its absolute best. The fact that it's been 5 years and they didn't miss a beat is incredible to me. The adjectives I would use are catchy, thoughtful, like thought-provoking music, beautiful, and brutal. And it really just kind of checks off all of those boxes. An absolute pleasure to have these guys back. I was a big fan of their last album. It was good to see them again. I'm just hoping they get on some tours, because it's a band that I would love to see live at some point.
I was aware of the band. I didn't realize they had an album, or I just missed it in 2023. So that's one I'll have to go back to.
Okay, very good, very good. Temperance at 15, Theocracy at 14, and that brings me to one of the more extreme albums of the year that came in at number 13. This album, as I look at my list, I'm like, 13, damn, I'm shocked it's not in my top 10, but maybe that's just a bit of a testament to those that come after this. But this was a complete surprise for me. The band is called Fires in the Distance. The album is called Air Not Meant for Us, and they are a Connecticut-based doom death metal band that I just kept coming back to time and time again. What really did it for me is that the heaviness of the vocals and the guitar riffs was really accented by some awesome keyboard work. This is a band to keep an eye on, and for those that have never heard this band, do yourself a favor and go out and listen to this album. It had just enough of the catchiness to go along with the brutality that I was like just blown away from Jump Street. Really nice guys as well, and I just hope that the future is even brighter for these guys.
I listened to them on your recommendation, and they came in at number 64 for me. I enjoyed the album. It just wasn't quite enough to push its way into the top 50. Again, probably something I could have listened to a couple of more times, but there are some of these more heavy albums on the outside looking in for me. Ne Obliviscaris being another one that was I have at 63, and just some of the stuff that's a little outside my wheelhouse kind of landed in that 51 to 75 range. So I'll continue to mention them as we go through the rest of your list.
Good. I hope you do, and I'll actually use this as a segue to just mention a couple of albums that were outside of the top 25 that were in my top 50. Bands that I think a lot of people just might not have heard of because they're a touch more obscure, but they deserved a place on the list, albeit just didn't make my top 25. One of those albums was a band called Halifron. The album was called Prey. It came in at 44 for me. Basically, it's Epica, albeit without the female vocals. It is just top-notch symphonic death metal, and I kept going back to that one as well. Really good stuff. I think you in particular might like that, although I think that not having Simone might be a little bit of a hurdle for you. But
yeah, but I feel that way about Green Day.
Yeah, that's well
basically
said,
any band that doesn't have Simone in it is makes me sad.
That's a good point. That's a good point. You mentioned Ne Obliviscaris. I have them at number 43. Another album I loved at number 40 was a band called On Thorns I Lay. This was an album that didn't make the list at first, but then I just kept going back to it, and I got too much of enjoyment out of it to not make the list at some point. It was just a perfect blend of melody, doom, and death. It just wasn't as good as Fires in the Distance to me, but it was definitely in that like genre, if you will. And then two black metal albums, Siemra, The Thread of Darkness, number 36, and Moonlight Sorcery, Horned Lord of the Thorned Castle, by Black Metal Album of the Year. Of particular interest because it has a lot of power metal elements to it. It was almost like a blend of black metal and power metal, and every time I heard it, I thought of you. It's saying this might be the first black metal album that could possibly appear on your list. So just a couple of things I'd be remiss not to mention.
I don't think I was aware of any of the bands you just listed, so I'm except for Nabla Viscaris, obviously. So I will definitely give those a listen when your playlist makes its way to me. I look more forward to hearing of the stuff I'm not familiar with than the stuff that I've already heard. Because
Sure.
I'm always interested to hear stuff that you hold in high regard that that I don't really know. So I'm looking forward to listening to some of this stuff.
Nice. I definitely enjoy making that set list. I think that it's one of those things that if you haven't heard it, definitely check out our Spotify pages because everything will be posted there, and it's a good kind of catch-all for some of this stuff as we kind of run through it pretty quickly. And as we approach the top 10, we get to number 12 with Temic, and the album is called Terror Management Theory. This was a late edition. It came out in November, but God, I played this album a lot for the 6 weeks that I got to listen to it before the end of the year. It's a bit of a modern prog metal supergroup in many ways, with former members of Mike Portnoy's Shattered Fortress and Neil Morse and obviously Haken. But this album was really good. The issue that I had with it, the reason it wasn't even higher, was that I thought that some of the highs were outstanding and there were some parts of some songs that lost me a little bit. But overall, it was just such a good listen that it did make its way pretty high on my list. Not the most accessible prog. I'm not surprised it didn't make your list.
Well, that's mostly because I didn't listen to it at all.
Oh, okay.
So I saw it on Glenn's list, and again, it was something I had been meaning to get to, but just didn't get a chance to. I'm actually listening to Mathala right now as we speak, and I could definitely see the appeal here. I think this is something that I'll probably like. So yeah, cool stuff.
Nice. As we get deeper into the list, we get to number 11. This is one of the few on my list that I just completely stole from Glenn, because I say to that, I had never heard of this band. I'm a little surprised it didn't make your list, and that's Blackbriar, the band, and the album is called A Dark Euphony. This is the album that knocked Beyond the Black down my list a little bit, because this was the real Within Temptation clone. Holy smokes. I'd never heard an album that sounded so much like Mother Earth to me, but this one surely did, and I loved it so much that it just kept listening to it, and it kept moving up my list the last few months of the year.
Yeah, I wanted to listen to this one more than I did. It still made my top 50. I have it at number 36, but I agree. This is like that old style of Within Temptation. It seems like no one, or at least nobody's come close to recreating that, Within Temptation included. This was really good for anybody who enjoyed that album. I echo your sentiments. Go listen to this, because it's really quite a throwback to that time, but done in kind of a modern way. Probably, I'm guessing it would have ranked higher for me had I had a chance to listen to it more than twice, but I was really impressed with it the 2 times I listened to it.
Nice. So now we have finally cracked the top 10. And there's a handful of albums here that you just didn't have on your list for one reason or another. So let's kind of get to it. I think the first album on my top 10 list that you don't have on your list is because I'd be shocked if you ever heard it. And the album is called Of Awakening, and the band is called The Circle. This is a short album from a bunch of German guys that describe themselves as art metal. And they kind of check off a lot of boxes here. Aggression, disharmony, yet captivating the listener in a sorrow and haunting atmosphere. Only 5 songs, but 2 of them are rather meaty in length. This was an album that was dark and haunting and brooding, but just short enough that I didn't feel like it was a slog by any means, so I kept going back to it. Really interesting approach to these compositions. Definitely worth a listen if you haven't heard them.
I'm not sure I've heard of them at all, so yeah, have to give that one a listen as well.
I kind of just stumbled upon that one at some point, and I really enjoyed it. I thought they did a really nice job with it. At number 9, a surprise in that I thought it was a bit of a departure for this band from their traditional sound, but just a trifle, and for the better, arguably. The band is Katatonia. The album was called Sky Void of Scars. There was something a little less melancholy on this release, which I actually rather enjoyed. And as a result of the fact that they still have that like Soen / Opeth sound, but it was just a touch more upbeat in spots while maintaining that core sound that was completely unexpected to me. And as a result, it was in the top 10. I just thought this release was fantastic. Ironically enough, they were announced for 70,000 tons of metal yesterday. A win all around for these guys. I can't wait to see them again.
Very nice. I listened to this album quite a bit when it first came out, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. Probably one of my favorite Katatonia albums. It didn't rank super high for me. I have it at 85, but I did listen to it a lot, and I agree. It had a little bit more of a bite to it and a little bit less of that kind of dreariness, which I don't particularly love about Katatonia. I thought it was a good album, and like I said, I pretty much everything on my top 100 I enjoyed listening to. It's just a matter of how much. But I've seen this on a number of people's lists ranked pretty high up, so I'm not terribly surprised to see it high on yours.
Yeah, very, very good. As we march on, number 8, by far the number 1 thrash metal album of the year for me, and that's Angelus Apatrida. The album was called Aftermath. Arguably the best production I've ever heard on a thrash album, and I like how they would deviate just a touch from their core sound as well, but not in a way where they ever stray from their roots as probably the best modern thrash band in my eyes. Just genre-defining stuff here. And every time I wanted to listen to something fast and aggressive and thrashy, I just went back to this album. These guys are flag bearers in a number of ways, and if the future is any brighter than this, then they're going to be releasing stuff that could compete with an album of the year.
Wow, big words. I have yet to listen to anything from this band, so I'm very curious when that playlist drops. I definitely will be keeping a particular ear out for them.
I have a suspicion you're going to like them for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, like I said, Overkill made my top 100 this year, so anything's possible.
It's a dawn of a new era. I like it. As we get to number 7, this was an album I was a little surprised was not on your list, and I only say that because from the second I heard it, I was like, this is really quality melodic metal from a guy who just writes such great songs. I was just surprised, and the album is called Hunt the Flame. It's Magnus Carlsen's Freefall coming in at number 7 for me. Just one of the most gifted, talented songwriters around with a completely random, incredible array of vocal performances from a number of relatively unknowns. Just a beautiful listen straight through, and I loved it every time I played it.
Do you know why it was not on my list?
You haven't heard it?
No, because it was at number 26.
Whoa, okay. So you're not far off. Just missed the list. Obviously, You like this one as well.
Yes, definitely. I mean, all of his albums are always great. I mean, he's got his hands in a lot of stuff, but as far as the Freefall stuff goes, haven't heard one I haven't liked yet, and this one I think was particularly good. I kind of forgot about it after the first time I listened to it, and when I went back and listened to it again, I was like, oh yeah, this was very good. Yeah, very good stuff. So yeah, that is definitely in my top 50 and just missed the top 25.
I like it. I like it a lot. At number 6, a band you mentioned on your list, and that is the new Sorcerer album, Reign of the Reaper. We covered this in long form, so I will not belabor the point other than to say Doom album of the year. This album was such an enjoyable listen. A pleasant surprise. I'm glad we did a deep dive on it, and just really hit home. I just thought they just kind of pushed the envelope in certain ways that they hadn't done on their prior releases, which was all the right buttons being pressed.
Well put.
I
don't think there's anything we could say that we haven't said already about that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna go in and go out pretty quickly on that one. Number 5 was another bit of a surprise to me because I was not so crazy about their last album, but this one I thought they hit it out of the park. The band is Insomnium. The album is Anno 1696. Really surprising in many ways, just because I don't want to say that their best was behind them, but I just didn't think that winter album was anything to write home about. And they had released a couple of EPs that didn't really do much for me. But I thought that this particular release was really good. An outstanding effort that just stayed high on my list and never dropped. I thought they just did a really good job with this new album.
Yeah, I liked it just fine. It fell outside of my top 100, but I definitely listened to it a bunch of times, and not really my favorite type of music, but I definitely appreciate it for what it is. I thought it was good. I didn't not like it. I'll say that.
Okay. We talked about The Lane. We talked about Crown.
I'm actually listening to Crown again right now. That's nice. How much I like Crown.
I'm with you there. But I'm going to skip to number 2, which is
I'm thinking maybe Crown goes on tour with Royal Hunt, and it's the Royal Crown tour.
You know something? As a big fan of RC Cola back in the day, you could do a lot worse. You could do a lot.
Or you could flip it and have the Crown Royal tour.
There you go. It's sponsored by Crown Royal. We get to number 2, an album which I am pretty sure is not on your list. It may not be on your list of anything. A band that draws the ire of many, but draws near and dear to my heart. Sleep Tokens, Take Me Back to Eden. This album had kind of come out to massive anticipation, and yet it just missed being my album of the year. There's not really any band out there that sounds like this right now, and I am just a massive fan of theirs after their last 2 albums. This band has blown up. I mean, there's nothing else to say, but they have blown up. They sold out Radio City Music Hall in about 3 minutes here in New York City. They are playing to a packed Red Rocks out in Colorado. You either love these guys or you hate these guys. I love them, and I am just so happy that they are getting the success that I think they otherwise deserve.
All I can say about Sleep Token is a band.
I think,
and they are on my list.
Where are they on your list?
They are 112 out of 112.
I will say nothing else.
And I'm not even going to say that I dislike the album. It's just I can't wrap my head around it. I just don't get it. If you love them, great. Just not really my cup of tea. I don't know if it one day it'll click for me, but for now it's just not happening. It's just very average to me. I don't even think that it's bad. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's bad just because I don't love it, because I feel like that would be disingenuous. But there was just a lot of stuff I enjoyed more, and I do not begrudge anybody for ranking them high, because I know quite a few people had them not just at number 2, but at number 1. So that's cool. Like, anytime a band that's in our area of coverage can blow up like this, it's good for all metal. So
you wouldn't even say they're above average. We don't even have like a Mike Sanders approach here. It's just
not yet. We'll see. Maybe the next album will blow me away. I don't know. I don't really like the vocals, and I feel like that's a big part of any band for me. So like getting past that is tough. So
gotcha.
Musically, it sounds like a lot of other heavy prog bands that I've it's interesting because like their songs are either like really chill or really heavy. It's an interesting combination, but yeah, I don't know. It's just not for me, but good for everybody else who seems to enjoy them. I'll stick to Sky Blazer.
There you go. I like it. And without further ado, my number one album of the year. The first time I heard it, I was giddy. The second time I heard it, I knew I had my album of the year, and nothing really got close. And that is No Spoon's Opus. Like I said, after the second listen, I just knew this was my album of the year. I gave everything else a fair shot. Nothing came close. I am so excited to see this band live. I am going to absolutely lose it when they take the stage at Prog Power. Nothing again that I haven't already said when we talked about them in long form and did our interview with a couple of the guys from the band, but this album is far and away the album of the year for me. This album has staying power. Every time I go back to it, I'm blown away more than I was the last. Introspective lyrics, just enough quirkiness to keep things interesting. A gem of an album.
Yeah, like I said about Sorcerer. What could be said that hasn't been said already? In fact, even more was said about this band because we actually had two of their members on the podcast talk about it. But this album came out about halfway through the year, and you pretty much told me this was your album of the year from Jump Street, and you stuck with it, and I think that says a lot about the album, and I get it. I totally get it. I've seen this one pretty high on some other people's lists as well. It was my prog metal album of the year, and I echo your sentiments that I am really looking forward to seeing them live at Prog Power. I like that Milton took a chance on these guys that don't really have much of a record as far as playing live, just based on the strength of the album. So thank you, Knops, for bringing this album to our attention, and I think collectively it should be ranked pretty high on our collective list once that is compiled.
I echo those sentiments completely. So,
you have to appreciate that our number one albums could not be more different between Twilight Force and No Spoon.
You're talking about, and the fact, and throw Sleep Token in there, and you got three really wild differences. But
yeah, we have the same number 3 with Crown. So
yeah, I listen. It's we don't have completely diametrically opposed tastes, just here and there.
Yeah, exactly. That's what makes our rapport work so well.
So with that, I just want to kind of sum up and say this. I thought it was a great year for prog. I thought it was a good year for like a handful of power metal bands. I thought it was a little disappointing for some of the doom and the death and the black and thrash, and even prog rock I thought was a little weak by other years' standards. But that being said, I think that there were many, many, many more solid releases this year when you compare to 2022, whereas it was almost hard to kind of discern between 38 and 22. For all intents and purposes, they're pretty much the same to me.
I think that's very well said. It's the top 25 was pretty easy for me to order, and then after that it just was like comparing an 8.75 with an 8.7475, like it's tough, and sometimes the tiebreaker for me a lot of times is I just look at two albums and go, which one of these would I rather listen to, and that's kind of what makes the decision.
That makes sense. And I just think if 2024 is any indication, or if it picks up where 2023 left off, there's a lot to smile about.
Well said. Well said.
So let's go just through quickly some of these other categories that we often talk about. Did you have a song of the year?
Nothing that really stood out. A lot of times there's like one song that just blows me away. of all the songs that came out, the one I listened to the most was "Upside Down" by Ad Infinitum. I just think that's a really catchy tune. And I guess rounding out the top three, I have "Is There Anybody Out There" from Beyond the Black and "Under the Blazing Sky" from Sky Blazer. I'd probably feel pretty good about calling those three of my favorite songs of the year, but I don't think there was just one song that really blew me out of the water. If it did, I forgot about it, so it couldn't have been that good.
There you go. For me, it was The Quest and the Curse by Delain. As I mentioned earlier, I was just blown away by that song, and it was a great introduction to the new lineup. And ultimately, I had mentioned this earlier as well, but kind of an honorable mention, 10 Something Wicked This Way Comes. I love the song. I just thought it was a really catchy song that I kept going back to all year.
Yeah, I'm going to echo my own comment from earlier, and if you have not listened to this 10 album, you probably should.
Yeah, well said, well said. Best debut album, Sky Blazer?
Well, I mean, Sky Blazer and No Spoon,
yeah.
Both, yeah, I mean, just Sky Blazer in so far as they're the highest ranked debut album on my list, but I guess the second highest would be No Spoon, so I guess they'll be worth mentioning too. And since you're number one, I guess that's kind of an easy one.
Yeah, I mean, just for a debut album to be number one is incredible in many ways. And sorry, guys, there's only one place to go, and that is down, because you've set the bar high, my friends. You've set the bar high.
Like, I feel like if we were doing this in 2003, we probably would have had like Master Plan's debut album at number one, except we both probably would have had it at number one.
Listen, I no argument here. That album to this day would be probably my album for 2003.
There you go.
Biggest disappointment? Anything that just didn't hit the mark for you this year?
I have a few things I want to mention.
Same here.
In this one, and there's a band that I alluded to earlier. We've now been talking for almost 2 hours, and we have not mentioned this band once, and they released an album last year, and if you knew either one of our tastes, you would be a little bit surprised that it's taken us this long to mention them, and they weren't in our top 25, and that's Voyager. I like the album Fearless in Love just fine. The problem is that Voyager is a band that, like, for me, an album of theirs not being in the top 5 for an album of the year is just a disappointment in and of itself. And for me, this didn't even make my top 25. I had it at number 30.
Okay.
I still liked it. It's still Voyager, a band that I love, but I just think speaking of setting the bars high, they've set the bar so high for me as a fan of the band that it's tough for me to, I don't know. I feel like their style is changing a little bit in a direction that I don't enjoy as much as some of the earlier stuff. I mean, I think even their previous album I had number 5 the year that it came out on my list, although the list was, I think, very, very short. But even still, that one definitely comes to mind. I'm going to look through my list because I know I had a couple others, but you say things now.
Yes, I will. Just to come full circle on that, Voyager came in at number 35 for me. So we were about the same. Didn't make the top 25. Didn't completely miss the mark on that one. But I have 2 albums that, one was just flat out terrible. The other one I just had higher expectations for. I don't know if anyone had a chance to listen to the new Virgin Steel album, but if you have, I am so sorry. It was god-awful. Just a huge disappointment. I don't know what else to say. It was just an awful album. Like, not good, not below average, just awful. And the second album was Arjun's Supersonic Revolution. I wanted to like this album. At one point, it was on the list because almost like a placeholder, because I thought I was going to like it more. And I don't know, man. Like, it wasn't bad. I just didn't really like it. And then I would go back to it. I'm like, yeah, I still don't really like it. And it just never made it onto the list.
That was another one I wanted to mention too, because I when I saw that this was coming out, I was like, this is a guaranteed top 25 for me. I mean, even the last Ayreon album, which a lot of people didn't think was one of the better Ayreon albums, I think was in my top 15 the year it came out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Arin, but this one was a miss for me. I didn't dislike it. It actually came in just under 100 at number 99 for me. I thought it was a little bit bloated. The music was good, but like there wasn't even one song that really blew, man, I just think of like every, Star One album, the first track just blows my socks off on all three albums. And like, on this one, I just, I think it was more of a pet project. And it was definitely a tribute to the 70s era of prog rock. But yeah, it didn't really hit the mark for me either. So I'm glad you mentioned it. Another one that I was a little bit, I wouldn't say it was disappointing. I think it was just overhyped by one of our listeners, was Xandria's The Wonder's Still Awaiting. I've always been a big fan of Xandria. I thought the album was very good. I didn't think it was, I think Brian said it was his album of the year, and he said that for most of the year. I have them at number 33. Definitely enjoyed it. But I think just the fact that they didn't crack the top 25 for me makes it the slightest bit disappointing. And I guess I'll also mention DGM, and I think it's just because the album came out so late in the year. I have them at number 48. I thought it was a very good album, but I just don't think that I had enough time for it to really marinate. It probably would rank higher if I had more time to listen to it. I do want to ask you this though. I'm looking at my list here. Did you have Metallica's 72 Seasons anywhere in your list, or was it even on your list at any point? I had it at number 61.
No, nowhere on my list is that album. It didn't. The first time I heard the first single, I said to myself, this has real potential, but I just didn't think the album was that great. Not that it was bad. Listen to Angelus Apatrida and then listen to the Metallica.
I would say it's probably my favorite Metallica album, since Robert Trujillo joined the band. Sure. I would say use that as a measuring stick.
I think that's fair.
I feel like the albums actually have gotten better and better since Saint Anger. At least the trajectory is going up, I think, since that point in time over the last 20 or so years. But whereas I think Megadeth made my top 50 last year, Metallica did not. And I did mention, Within Temptation, just another band that was like a guaranteed top 25 for me in the past. Just they're just become like just okay to me. I thought Bleed Out had some okay moments, but I think also like slowly releasing the singles over the last like 2 years, kind of, I don't know, it made it feel almost piecemealed. So for whatever reason, it didn't really resonate too much with me, unfortunately. I wanted to like the new Fandom Elite more than I did. I thought that previous album was a lot better. Not bad. They ranked a lot lower than I thought they would have. And I guess that's pretty much it. I don't want to, dwell too much, but that's pretty much all I'll say in that category. I mean, like I said, if it's in the top 100 for me, I enjoyed it.
I think that's well said. Moving along, best cover art. Anything jump out at you? Because there's one that really I just loved.
You go, and I'll just say that that the one you chose was also my favorite.
So it's a band that I don't think was on your list, and that's Haken. But I thought the monkey in the suit really just did it for me. I thought he was really cute, so I'm giving it to Haken.
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned them because they were they were a big disappointment for me this year. I know a lot of people really loved Fauna. I listened to it a bunch of times, and the last time I listened to it, I mean, this album was pretty much towards the bottom of my list. I will say the last time I heard it, I started to pick up on some of what is enjoyable about it. I listened to it, I think 5 times, but it was just stuck at 86 for me. I actually have Catatonia ahead of it, if you can believe it. I thought it was good, but there's just Haken albums that I enjoy quite a bit more, and I thought No Spoon kind of stole their thunder, I think, in 2023.
Nice. I can totally understand that.
Were they on your list? I don't remember hearing you mention them. Yeah.
Haken was number 47, so I did not mention them, but they did make the list. It was too good not to make the list, but it was too disconjoined to go higher up, if that makes sense. Like, I enjoyed it, but like it didn't blow me away.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I felt, except
lower.
Less blown away.
There you go. Best comeback. You mentioned them earlier. To me, whether it's Delain or whether it's Camelot, you can take your pick, but both of them were phenomenal comeback albums.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I probably would say more so Camelot, because I liked Delain's previous album. Sure. I think it's just the surprise comeback, as far as like coming back from the edge of oblivion for Delain, because I mean, when I remember when they broke up and we did our episode on April Rain, it was almost like we were kind of eulogizing the band at the time.
That's right.
And for them to come back, I thought that their I believe it was Apocalypse and Chill was their last album with Charlotte. There was probably one of my all-time favorite Delain songs is on that album. But again, like I mentioned before, I think having her, Charlotte and Martine kind of splitting the songwriting kind of made the previous Delain albums feel a little uneven or disjointed. And this just feels like such a more complete, like almost like a singular vision. But yeah, Camelot for me probably has to be the biggest jump in quality for one band for me, from one album to the next. And at least for me personally, like I had mentioned before, a band like 10, who I hadn't listened to in years, for them to come in and just blow me away and end up with an album in my top 10, no pun intended. And I would throw Accent Star as well in that, just because I kind of lost track of them for a little while, and I thought that they really brought it with their latest album. So nice. Those are the ones I would mention for sure.
What was your best concert of the year?
Oh man, it's funny. I don't think I really stopped to think about this. I would say it would have had to have been at Prog Power, only because I really didn't see a lot of concerts this year. Obviously,
you saw Halloween.
Yeah, Halloween and Powerwolf definitely come to mind. Yeah, I guess it would have to be that Halloween show. It was my first time seeing Michael Kiske sing live, and my first time seeing the Pumpkins United group. When they busted out with Save Us, I almost wet myself right in the middle of the floor there. Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. It almost feels like it happened like the year before. I kind of forgot that was 2023. As far as Prog Power goes, I would say Battle Beast set at Prog Power was probably my favorite set of the 4 days or the 3 days that I actually witnessed. And that probably would be my number 2 favorite set of the year. I thought they really just I don't know if they were if they just are always that good, or they were just wanted something to prove, being in that second from the bottom slot as a replacement band. But boy, they put on a headliner worthy performance. So I would definitely put them on that list as well.
Nice. For me,
and honorable mention to Vola, a band that I had no knowledge of going into the year, and I thought their live performance was out of this world.
Good. I got to be honest. I thought they were great too. But when it all boils down to, for me, is obviously every time I see Halloween with Kiske, but the Powerwolf show, man, they made a believer out of me. So those were the 2, just because I wasn't expecting either of them to be as good as it was. It was just mind blown for both of them. So
I enjoyed that a lot as well.
Biggest surprise album. or band?
Probably Angus McSix, because my expectations were less than zero for that album, and it ended up being a lot of fun, albeit goofy as hell. I guess there should be some credit to I forget his name, but the guy from Orton Ogan, who I believe had a hand in the songwriting here. But I got to tell you, man, I was not expecting Angus McSix to be ranked ahead of Gloryhammer, but here we are. They are on my list. I have Angus at 32 and Gloryhammer at 39. I just enjoyed the Angus McSix album more, and I just happen to enjoy his vocals, even if he's not the best live singer. I just think in the studio he has such a unique sound, and the songs were fun. So yeah, I would say that. At least for like a positive surprise, the negative surprises I feel like we've kind of gone through. Anything kind of pop into your head?
I'd probably, No Spoon aside, I would say either The Circle or Fires in the Distance, like I mentioned earlier, both in and around my top 10, both of which I hadn't heard of prior to the year starting. So I think all three of them in their own way, the fact that they all were so high on my list is very telling. All of which were big surprises.
Yeah, I think if you just kind of go back and listen to some of the things that I'd mentioned, there were a few things that kind of caught me off guard in a good way, whether because the band was brand new or I hadn't been paying attention to them in a while. But there were, I think, a lot of pleasant surprises. I will mention I enjoyed Floor Jansen's solo album quite a bit. Huh. It was not a metal album by any stretch, but really just good songwriting and catchy, more of a kind of a pop album than anything else, but it was cool to hear Floor do something a little bit different than the typical symphonic metal style that we're used to. I had it at number 44. I thought it was a nice high. Yeah, I thought it was a nice little escape from the usual. I also had the Foo Fighters in my top 50 nice. At number 29 with But Here We Are. I really enjoyed. That was probably my first Foo Fighters album. I've really enjoyed it in a few years, and I think there was a lot of emotion behind this one after Taylor Hawkins passed away. But I like this one a lot, and it's probably one of the least metal albums I have on this list. But I felt like I'd be remiss to not give them the credit that was due.
Nice. I like it. I thought that was a good album as well. It didn't make my list, but I remember listening to it and being like, yeah, this is enjoyable for sure. As we keep going down the list here, do you have a favorite cover song from the year? Because I have 3 that stand out to me.
Oh, man, I have a few. There's 3 of them all on one playlist that I came out with at the end of the year. And if I can just figure out how to use a mouse, it was a little bit of a threesome of 80s songs with I Just Died in Your Arms by Lord of the Lost, Separate Ways by Exit Eden, and Mighty Wings by Gloryhammer. I don't know why I pronounced it like that, Gloryhammer. But I don't know, man. I have to say Powerwolf's version of Bark at the Moon might be my favorite of the year. I thought that they really knocked that one out of the park, and that's one of my all-time favorite Ozzy songs, and I thought they really did it justice.
Good choice. I forgot about that one. That was good. If you would have asked me up until about a month ago, I had 2 on my list, and then a third just eclipsed them both. The ones I was talking about, Ronnie Romero doing Kind-Hearted Light, awesome. And then Melissa Bonney and Adrian Cowan doing Lady Marmalade. I thought that was like really catchy. But my favorite of the year is actually Judicator. They covered The Curse of Feanor, and it was freaking amazing because, they have a touch of that Blind Guardian sound in them to begin with. But I just thought that the cover was exceptionally well done.
I did not know that existed.
You have to go listen to that when we are done.
Did not know about that one. So, yeah, I'm going to have to go back and check that out. But, yeah, some good covers. If we were counting this year, we may have to include Tommy Johansson's version of No Easy Way Out that literally dropped earlier today.
Yeah, that was good.
Check that out on YouTube if you're a fan of the Rocky IV soundtrack.
Did you have any EPs on your list that were noteworthy?
Let's see. Nothing that really. Oh, shocking! Terra Maze came out with an EP.
I was gonna say they did it again. Della Volta. It was a quiet year by their standards. Only one release. It was only an EP, but it was very good, and it was on my list.
I would say for me, it would either be Ghosts, Phantomime, for no other reason than the outstanding covers of Jesus, He Knows Me, and Phantom of the Opera by Iron Maiden. I thought they... It's funny, as much as I can't get down on Sleep Token, Ghost is a band that I happen to really enjoy. And I thought some of these covers were really good. And also, Lane Genie came out with an album. It was only 8 songs, so I kind of considered it an EP in my list, and it's really just a number of covers from Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which was the most recent Kirby game. But I thought I would mention them because I thought that was good. Palantir, Johannes' other band, had a EP called Nightmare Opus that had a lot of good stuff on it. Stream of Passion was back with Beautiful Warrior. I don't know that I listened to any of these EPs enough to call any of them my favorite. Terminal Dusk was a band that reached out to us, and they had a 3-track EP that I thought was good called Marionette. Induction had an EP called The Power of Power that you recommended that I liked. But I don't know if there's anything that I would say was better than the other. Although I did really enjoy the Isan EP, Fascination Street Sessions. There's some good tunes on that. I'm looking forward to his full-length album that's set to come out in 2024.
Nice. The only thing I would add to that list is a Swedish band called Act, A.C.T. They came out with an EP called Falling. This is a Swedish band, prog rock, that I've been listening to for a while, and although I think some of their stuff is better than other stuff, I thought their new EP was really, really enjoyable and definitely worth checking out if you're into prog rock. So,
yes.
Wanted to
and there was one other EP from a band called Vengeant, and that it was called Mana, 4-track EP. It's a symphonic, progressive power metal, like all that good stuff, all rolled into one. I thought this was good too. I guess if I had to pick one, I would probably choose this as my favorite EP of the year.
So, as we get to the end of this thing, most anticipated release for next year, or now this year?
Green Day is definitely up there. They have an album coming out next week, and their last album was probably my least favorite Green Day album ever, and it's not close. So, I'm hoping that this one, at least from the singles I've heard so far, as I've mentioned, it kind of sounds like a return to the it sounds the most to me like the 21st Century Breakdown, Revolution Radio, maybe like something from Uno Dos Tres, something in that kind of Uno Dos Tres, something in that area of their timeline. So that one I'm looking forward to. I'd really have to look and see who else has albums coming out. I know I have a number of singles that I've gotten from some albums that haven't quite been released yet. But I don't know if there's anything that I'm really like dying to hear.
There wasn't anything for me either. The only one that really came to mind was the new Bruce Dickinson album. I'm just curious more than anything else to hear what he's going to do after having such a long hiatus as a solo artist. I'm really curious about that one. Although I don't know that I have high expectations, I remain very curious. So I'd be remiss not to mention that one.
Yeah, I'll also mention the band Alterium. Their first album will be released. Let's see if I can get a date on that, because I'm pretty sure it's early. Yeah, March 8th. They've released a number of singles so far, and I have to say, so far so good. I believe there's 4 singles, but big fan of Nicoletta Rossellini. I had Kalidia's remake of Lies Device on my list for 2021, pretty high, even though it was a remake of an album that already came out. That's how much I liked it. But I'm a big fan of her vocals. I feel like so far, this band sounds like it's pretty much in the same vein as Kalidia was. And I believe there are at least 2 ex-members. So I'd say that's probably up there too. But I don't know that there's that many bands that have outright said they have albums coming out next year or this year. I know Sonata Arctica has one coming out, but with them, it's always cautious optimism.
Sure.
So we'll see. But stay tuned to the podcast. We'll be mentioning all of it as it's released, as we always do.
And do you have an MVP for the year?
Just based on how often she appeared, probably has to go to Melissa Bonney. And why do I feel like she was the MVP last year too? But she's on the new Camelot album. She is obviously on the new Ad Infinitum album. I have the Dark Side of the Moon Metamorphosis album in my top 50 that she was on as well. I want to say there was another album on my list that she made an appearance on that I am not remembering. But shit, I might have Nora Luimo in my MVP just for that performance at Prague Power. Just the choreography of all of her movements, along with just her unbelievable singing voice, and then being an absolute sweetheart backstage. Personally, she was my MVP for 2023. But as far as doing the work, Melissa Bonney was all over the place. Was it Pyramaze? Is that the album I'm thinking of that she was also on? I believe she was on the new Pyramaze album. So
great choice. I'd be remiss not to mention a guy who was not only on one of my top 25 discs, but 2 of my top 25 discs. And I alluded to him earlier, and insofar as Alexander Strandell from Art Nation and Crown. The guy was literally the lead vocalist on 2 of my discs in the top 25. So for that alone, I'm going to make him my MVP.
That's completely fair. I will invent a new category right now, and it'll be, I'm going to call it Best Newcomer, and I'm giving that one to Kristen Starkey. She's not new to me, but I want to say the Temperance album is one of the first albums or full-length albums that she's appeared on, or at least is that I'm aware of the first band that she's in officially, not like a side project or something like that. I think that she's going to be a big deal. And I've thought that even when she was just doing like YouTube cover videos and stuff, just very unique, but she has such a powerful voice, and it's in that bit of a lower register than some of these other vocalists that are more well known, like the Floors and the Simones of the world. I just want people to be able to come back to this episode and be like, oh yeah, he was right. I've always had a feeling about her, and she's definitely proving it with this this new Temperance album that we both had mentioned earlier. So
nice.
That's my new invented award.
I like it, and because it's your show, you can do that. So good for you. I think that puts a bow.
And I guess we should probably we'll mention Johannes as well. For I don't know that he I feel like he's been around for a while, but with the new Sky Blazers debut album, I'll give a shout out to him as well. He's also been on the podcast, so he gets a little extra love for that. So. But I echo what you said. I thought it was a hell of a year for music, and there's part of me that, as much as I look forward to doing this episode with you, I almost feel a sense of relief that it's done.
And now we can look ahead to 2024, where I have one album on my list for next year. So be that as it may, I'm glad we get to put a bow on 2023 and look ahead. We will return to our regularly scheduled format next week. I look forward to hearing what album you have in store for us. And we'll leave it as a surprise for our listeners as to what it is that we'll be covering next week on the podcast.
Yeah, you know what? We'll tell our Patreon people what we're doing ahead of time, give you a little bit of motivation to join the Patreon if you haven't yet. They'll also be getting this episode a little bit earlier as well. But I just wanted to say thanks to everybody that supported the podcast in 2023, but especially the Patreon people who have, put their hard-earned money towards helping us out. And we greatly appreciate everything that you guys and gals have done for us. And to all of the new listeners that may have just came over because we did an interview with two guys from Nevermore, or previously of Nevermore. Welcome and thanks for joining us, and hopefully you stick around. And onwards and upwards. I am excited for 2024. I'm hoping I get to see a few more concerts. I did not go to a lot of concerts in 2023. I saved, like we mentioned, I saved it for a lot of the big occasions, like seeing Powerwolf's first U.S. show and finally getting to see the Pumpkins United Halloween tour. But you will be giving us a rundown of 70,000 Tons of Metal in a few weeks, so I look forward to hearing about that. That was really interesting hearing everything firsthand from last year's cruise, so that's something else to look forward to. But in the meantime, yes, we have an album next week that will be a surprise. We'll have one more album chosen by you the following week, and then the mother of all requests in February. Thank you, Keith. We're still gonna not let the cat out of the bag. Our Patreon people probably are pretty aware of this at this point, but it's happening. And I will just say this: I have a playlist of albums that we are set to cover for the podcast, and whenever the first song from this album comes on, I'm like just physically angry that we need to talk about it. So I'll just leave it at that. I think it's going to make for at least some entertaining conversation, but I'm not looking forward to listening to it.
No, neither am I. I'm actually dreading it, to be honest with you. So be that as it may, here's to a happy and healthy 2024, and I will catch up with you soon, my friend. This was fun.
Yes, I am going to go gargle salt water after talking for 2 hours.
Take it easy, my friend.